Hi class, I figured I would send out another video tutorial of what was expected of you with the Dr. Carson letter by looking at a standout example and sort of talking through what works and maybe some things that can still be improved. So you'll remember that Dr. Carson um, assignment was to read his thoughts about allowing Syrian refugees into the United States and respond to his letter by first talking about whether or not you agree with him and then giving reasons why. And so some of you decided to give personal reasons as to why you agree or disagree, and others of you decided to go into his argument and sort of talk about what in his argument is weak that makes it simply just un- impossible to agree with. So, or I don't think anyone really chose to agree with him, and the few of you that did picked reasons in other arguments to support that. You didn't really go to Dr. Carson. But anyhow, let's read this letter together and then talk about what we're noticing works or doesn't. So, dear Dr. Carson, after carefully reading your article about the U.S. not allowing any Syrian refugees into the States, I must express that your essay represents hysterical racism that holds no valid argument. Now, what I love about this first sentence is it's grammatically correct. And if you're telling someone that you are reading something that they've written, it's always a good idea to identify what you read from them and where you read that piece of article, and also like a summary of what that article was about. So some of you put after reading, article, and then just put the title, I believe you are wrong, which is okay, but this method, you can see it's clearer because immediately Dr. Carson knows what it is the student is referring to, what article that they've written that the student is referring to. For example, the uses of jihadist is applied incorrectly. Now, what I like about this sentence is I like, for example, and then what follows is an example of what? How Dr. Carson is using hysterical racism. So notice how everything is sort of connected in terms of thought. This is related to jihadist. Jihad is the internal struggle to be a good Muslim and clear from sin. Therefore, jihad is a concept that is not violent, although you seem to view it that way. So, stating those who harbored the jihadist views that have spread violence and hatred around the world is a misrepresentation of the actual term. Your rationalization to condemn the Islamic religion as evil and barbarism is unnecessary because of the actions of one group. The Islamic religion is a path that offers salvation for the individual like most religions. We must remember that the spread of Christianity was done violently and people were forced into conversion. So to express that a specific religion as evil is to express that every politician as evil. So here we notice that there's some grammatical things that we'll deal with. The American people would vote more if they trusted the system more. Okay, so couple of things. We are clear about the purpose of the beginning of the paragraph. It's to explain how jihadist is being applied incorrectly. But then along the line, and I would say right here, we sort of switch and we're not talking about misrepresentation, but we're talking about something different. Here you're talking about Christianity and how Christianity has also done violent things, but I'm not sure what that has to do with the point you were making before. I feel like, and I'm saying you as though only one person is watching, but hopefully all of you are seeing that it seems like there's a shift, and what needs to happen is a connection should be drawn between this idea of labeling a group of people or having a group of people represent a whole. That idea has to connect to this idea of Christianity also being violent. I'm not quite sure on the connection yet. And then in this sentence, so to expresses that a specific religion as evil is to express that every politician as evil. I think this is supposed to represent the connection that I'm missing between these two pieces, but because I'm not sure what is being said, the connection is lost. Now, what I think is supposed to be happening is the as is supposed to be is. And I think politician is supposed to be Christian based on what came before. But again, I can't be certain. And if I'm an ALST grader, it's not my job to guess what you meant. It's only my job to look at what I have in front of me. So here, and again, this is a really strong piece, but even still, there's room for improvement. And I think this improvement is something we can all learn from because it's something that we all sort of struggle with, and that is going back and rereading things and asking ourselves, is this something that would make sense to someone that isn't in my head? Because remember, none of us get the luxury of inviting the test graders into our mind so they know exactly what we meant. And then I'm not sure what the American people would vote more if they trusted the system more has to do with anything related to that paragraph. So for that reason, it also feels a little out of place. We have considered ourselves, as Americans, the land of free. Therefore, we are the home of many races, cultures, and religions. So, to use a terminology that expresses the Islamic religion as evil would be disrespectful to the Americans that are Muslims. The word extremism should be sufficient enough to get your point across about those who share the Islamic belief in a hateful manner. I do agree with the statement that Muslim Americans have made wonderful contributions to America and unfortunately are viewed negatively by their communities. However, Muslim Americans are viewed negatively by the extremist who has no balance between religious ideology and secular ideology. So, a Muslim American serving the U.S. military will automatically become an enemy to the Islamic extremist, even though they share the same religion. Remember, stating that these Muslim Americans are denouncing the violent or misogynist teachings of radical Islamists, while radical and extremist are both synonyms. Remember, Dr. Carson, we have Muslim Americans in our country who support our strong values and belief. We should learn to distinguish them from terrorists. So here the main point is understanding that Islam and Muslims are not something that is the opposite of being an American. I think this writer makes a really strong point about how there are Muslim Americans who are also victimized by the same kind of ideology, the same kind of extremism that Dr. Carson feels sort of victimized by. So that's great. You'll notice that I bolded by the extremist. The reason why is I'm not sure that this student is referring to one extremist or multiple. And so I think it would sound way better if it was extremists because we've been talking in plural thus far. Also, you'll notice values is plural, so beliefs should be plural as well. There's no such thing as having a strong multiple values and then only one singular belief unless you want to talk about what that one singular belief is. I think that there's a way in which this paragraph could be separated into two paragraphs. One that focuses on Muslim Americans making contributions, and then the other talking about the ways in which Muslim Americans are also victims of extremism themselves. That would just be a suggestion. Especially because this last sentence, I would even say around here, it starts to get a little unwieldy and a little confusing what we're asking Dr. Carson to remember and why. So I think separating those two ideas would help. We both understand that ISIS is a terrorist group we should be mindful of. However, we should not let their presence fill the American people with fear. You quote that President Barack Obama cannot even bring himself to confront the enemy by its name, and you fail to historically see why. We all understand the seriousness of ISIS and its goal, but to allow that hysteria to blind us is not wise. Remember McCarthyism and the mistreatment of homosexuals or Pearl Harbor and the internment camps. Remember that McCarthy provided false speculation and the internment camps sought loyalty through betrayal and servitude. We must provide information that does not provoke unwarranted mistreatment of a specific group and to not create fearful hysteria to the American people. So for me, structurally, this is the strongest paragraph. It's really focused on the way hysteria can be very dangerous, and it's perfect in that. But there are a couple of grammatical things that you might have noticed. Presences is just not a word. Unless you're talking about a group of people who had somehow multiple presences. Presence is just something we talk about in singular form. And then also here, if you're referring to a specific terrorist group or a specific anything, you should use the article right? So that ISIS is a terrorist group we should be mindful of. And I think, remember, you must provide information. I think that was it in terms of grammar. Yeah. So let's go to the last paragraph. Lastly, Dr. Carson, you are allowed to feel skeptical about the U.S. allowing Syrian refugees into the states. However, the reasons for not allowing them in are not acceptable. We must remember that as much as ISIS holds an unfavorable place in our lives and history, this feeling is also shared with the Syrian refugees. I suggest you brush up on your history. All right. So what I love about this ending is it sort of serves Dr. Carson like the ball's in your court, but just know the rules of the game kind of thing, which I really like. A couple of grammatical things. Whenever you have a verb that is connected with are, right? You are, the actual verb should be in past tense. So you are allowed to feel skeptical. You are, I can't now think of another example, but it should be are allowed to feel skeptical. And then the reason why this is incorrect is when you have an article in front of a phrase or any word, if the word starts with a vowel, this should really be N, holds N unfavorable place. And because U is a vowel, it needs to be N. And that's it. So what I think would be helpful if you are able to put up with my voice for this long is to create a list of the various rules that I bring up in these video tutorials so that you can have some cohesive thing to look at when you're practicing your writing, when this course ends, because yes, eventually this course will be over. I think, if you just hear the rule in a couple of minutes, you'll forget about it. But if you just create a list for yourself, even if you have some of these examples and correct them and then note the reason why you're correcting them, that can also be helpful. So hopefully you found this useful in thinking about your next written assignment. You'll remember that I asked that you look at the 2 articles on junk food and evaluate it for its weaknesses and strengths, specifically telling me who makes a more compelling argument. For those of you who didn't even write the Dr. Carson letter yet, and I say didn't even, not to be accusatory, but more to say, we have a couple of things that we're going to be doing next class, and I don't want you to feel like you're behind. So this video tutorial is also as a support for you to see what was expected. If you'd like, you can still try to write your Dr. Carson response, but if you feel like you want to move on to this new junk food assignment, that's fine as well. So I will see you all Saturday, and until then,